it is a company's market right now. They are in control, and there's more candidates than there are jobs right now. Qualified candidates too. Like it's not just like, oh, like people that have never done this job before. It's like people that have, all this experience. So I think from a candidate's point of view, stay in tune on what that's looking like. One thing and if you're looking into, especially to get into tech, there's websites and people that will show like companies that like are doing layoffs, or companies that are just got a funding round, or companies that just went IPO. So looking at those companies might be an easier way for you to be able to see like, okay, this is a good time to like apply for this company because they're going to be looking to hire like a ton more people. Or maybe this is not a good time for me to apply to this one company that just had a layoff.
Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Amoroso, co-founder of Apex, a scaleless company. Thanks for tuning in to Career Hack, a podcast dedicated to assisting college students and early career professionals with entering the workforce and ascending the corporate ladder. Today I'm talking with Lizzy Mann, who's the former director of people operations at Recharge, which is a leading subscription commerce platform for e-com brands. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So before we jump into all of the HR related things that we want to cover today, could you give everybody just a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Brandon said, my name is Lizzy Mann. I'm the former director of people operations at Recharge. I was at Recharge for about 3 years. I started my career in recruiting about 10 years ago, and then stayed in the recruiting operations space before merging together with people operations. So I've seen almost every single aspect of HR, whether that's recruiting internships, campus programming, recruiting operations, how you apply for jobs, what comes through the interview process, so on and so forth. So very excited to be here and kind of talk about that stuff.
What inspired you to get into HR in the first place?
Yeah. Well, to be transparent, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was actually going into journalism. And then my sister actually was like, hey, you're really good with people. Maybe you should try human resources. I was like, I don't even know what that is. They don't really teach us about like what human resources is in high school. And so I'm not sure how they do it in high school these days, but like it's really hard for us to navigate and figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life when you're 18. So I was like, sure, let's go with human resources. And I ended up being the only person in my freshman class to actually declare a major in human resources. Again, a lot of people didn't know what it was. And then slowly but surely, as time went on, more and more people started joining the program. I really, really liked it because I like order, and I like routine, but I also love like working with people. And it's so cliche to say, like everyone says that I love working with people, but normally people don't stay in HR because they like working with people. They truly like making a difference in companies and driving the business forward. And I think in HR, we have a really cool opportunity to do that, and not so much just like, oh, hey, like let's hire and fire people. There's so many different aspects of HR that are growing from a day-to-day basis that for pretty much every single type of skill set, you can find aspect of HR that'll fit into. So it's really about driving the business forward, empowering people to do their best work, and making sure that, we can remain, have internal equity and make people happy and find the right talent for those positions. So it's really behind the scenes career and, occupation that is really critical to a lot of businesses.
What's one thing, after you fell into it and discovered that you were passionate about it, what's one thing that you weren't expecting that, once you got started, you're like, oh, wow, like I can't believe that, this is done this way, or, I had no idea that this was going to be a thing that I had to deal with?
That's a great question. I think this was early on in my career. As a recruiter, and I had to reject people to their face for a job. And even though that was really hard because I'm just a natural people pleaser, it was such great experience, just having difficult conversations. And so really refining that skill set of being able to have difficult conversations. And I'm still working on it to this day 10 years later. So
Mm.
being able to have difficult conversations and be transparent yet still respectful is not really necessarily something that I was like really set up for, because I was like, oh, I'm going into this career because I like to make people happy. I didn't realize I sometimes will also not make them happy, make them really pissed
Yeah.
at me. But it gave me a lot of confidence in what I did, because I think there's still a way that you can, be transparent with people, but also be respectful. And that's just such a hard thing to learn. And that just takes time and practice.
Yeah, and sometimes the news, is never going to make that person happy. And so, you know, I I definitely empathize with having to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, it is what you have to do. So,
Mhm. Well, and sometimes you're doing them a disservice if you're not being transparent and not being constructive with people. I've led teams where I've had a hard time telling people like, "Hey, we need to change this up," and before it's too late. And it's something that is really really difficult sometimes, because you don't like seeing people that you spend every day with upset, pissed off at
yeah.
you. But again, like you have to think about the bigger picture of like, I'm doing them a disservice if I'm not giving them this feedback or I'm not having these difficult conversations.
So, being on both sides of the sort of coin where you were just getting started out in your career and you weren't really sure what you wanted to do, to now where you're on the other side and you're seeing, a bunch of applicants from, who are just leaving school or just getting started with their career, and they may or may not be sure, what to do. What are some, I guess, tips or advice that you would give yourself back when you were, still trying to figure out how you want to proceed with your career? And then subsequently, what would you tell somebody who's just getting started right now? Because
Mhm.
obviously, things have evolved drastically, even in just the past 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different sort of hiring landscape. It feels like every 3 months nowadays.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think, what I would tell myself back then, and then also what I would tell people, starting out their career today, would be very similar things, is find those people that you want their career. So find those people that are, super big like on LinkedIn, or, they're super big in their industry, and follow what they do and see how their career has progressed. Try to reach out to them to see if you can pay for a coffee, have a coffee talk, try to see what their journey looked like to get there. And if that's something, and like talk about the challenges, the good, the bad, the ugly. Is that something that you can see yourself, doing? I think that's something that's really hard to consider sometimes when we're going into jobs, especially as an early career. We're so optimistic of like, oh my God, I'm going to get to do all these amazing things and it's going to be so great. But like, little did I realize I was going to be telling people to their face that they're getting rejected, or firing people to their face. So like if you told me that 10 years ago, I don't think I would have been as excited to get in the career. So find those people that you look up to, that are, really well versed in their career. It could be someone in your school, like a professor. It could be someone that's in a company that you super admire. See if you can reach out to them and try to interview them, try to pick their brain. Always offer something in return. And also that can be a great way for you to network. And that way they can kind of give you like a real world scenario. Because sometimes what professors are saying in the classroom isn't real world experience. It's out of textbooks, and those textbooks could be out of date. And so trying to find those people that are currently in the industry that are doing these jobs day to day will really help you understand, is this something that I want to do? And I think that would be something that I told myself. Luckily, like I'm still in HR, which is very rare for most people to actually still be
Yeah.
in the career that they got their degree in. I'm one of very few. Um, and also don't let that hold you back just because you get your degree in something, but you find something else. Don't be like, well, I have to start all over. No, see how you can get those transferable skills over into another career that you could possibly be interested in. But find those people, especially with social media, and we're so integrated with each other nowadays than we were back then. It'll be a lot easier to find out those people that you admire that have that job that you want to have in 10 years. Interview them. I've had people reach
Mhm.
out to me, and I had someone tell me, just kidding. I don't want this. This actually sounds awful. I'm like, I don't blame you. And so, it was a really great conversation. And I think people that genuinely love what they do, they're going to be geeked about talking about it anyways to somebody. And so,
Mhm.
I've done it and I've also given interviews to other people. So I think it's a super helpful, old school tactic, but like it's a lot more accessible these days given the digital environment that we live in.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially when you're still in college, people are much more willing to help than necessarily the later and later you get in your career. And that's probably a good way to be able to stand out, in the application process as well. If you have a connection with inside that company, or referrals that are able to boost your resume to the top amongst the hundreds or thousands that are getting thrown in.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with the ever changing just sort of hiring environment? Because even in from the time COVID hit to now, I'd probably say there's been like three or four different swings between uh, the employees really having the power in the hiring market, and then companies having the power within the hiring market. And
Hmm.
are there like different ways that um, a candidate needs to think about their role or the potential roles that they're seeking, given which sort of climate the job market is in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're 100% correct. And there's just in the last 3 years, from my time at Recharge, we've done a complete 180 on the hiring environment. When I first joined Recharge, we were in a time of hyper growth, and we had like a team of almost 20 recruiters. Obviously, that's not the case anymore, just because of the hiring environment, and it's not as much of like a need. And
Mm.
so, how candidates can navigate this is like, yeah, maybe 2 years or 2 or 3 years ago, it was a candidates market, and candidates could blindly apply to jobs, just using those keywords out of those job posts and being able to do that. And like there's going to be enough recruiters in house and less quantity of applicants to be actually able to see your resume. Um, Also, it's been shown that recruiters look at a resume for an average of 7 seconds. So it's not, so you take that 7 seconds, times it by 2,000 applicants, like my brain would be fried. So
Yeah.
I think as this changes, I don't think it's really like big news to anybody, even in the early career market, that it is a company's market right now. They are in control, and there's more candidates than there are jobs right now. Qualified candidates too. Like it's not just like, oh, like people that have never done this job before. It's like people that have, all this experience. Um, so I think from a candidate's point of view, stay in tune on what that's looking like. Um, One thing and if you're looking into, especially to get into tech, there there's websites and people that will show like companies that like are doing layoffs, or companies that are just got a funding round, or companies that just went IPO. So looking at those companies might be an easier way for you to be able to see like, okay, this is a good time to like apply for this company because they're going to be looking to hire like a ton more people. Or maybe this is not a good time for me to apply to this one company that just had a layoff. So I think that's
Yeah.
one way that you can just keep in tune with the market. Subscribe to newsletters that kind of like have like little bite-sized bits of what the market's looking like, and what are some like 5-second digestible spark notes of what companies are doing, because that could really help give you and arm you with the knowledge of like, like I know a lot about these companies, and so you're going to stand out more in the or in the interview process. B, you might have a better chance of being seen and being interviewed if you know what's going on with that company and what are the priorities of those companies. I think also like when you read about these companies and you look for their priorities, if your job aligns to what their priorities are, then you're going to probably have a better chance of being seen and being interviewed than applying for jobs for companies that maybe isn't a priority. So, for
Mm.
example, if a company is rolling out a tech product or a new SaaS software engineering, that's going to be in high demand for them. Look up what coding languages they're using. Make sure that you're well versed in that coding language and putting that at the top of your resume, because that's something that they're going to be really looking at and putting a lot of their recruitment strength and heavy lifting into those roles. So I think that's kind of like a more elegant way of doing it. And then, but like the other way is network, just network,
Yeah.
find those people, find those groups on LinkedIn, find those groups on Facebook, find alumni groups, go to those career fairs, go to those trade shows. I think that's like face to face interaction. We've gotten away from that just because our comfortability within COVID. And so I think that's why when some people make those connections and can network, it really sets people apart because we are in a world where we are lacking that face to face interaction and human interaction because we're always behind a screen. So if you can find a way to get in front of someone and actually talk to them and be able to make a presence, that's going to be a lot more impactful than making sure that your resume is the most beautiful resume in the entire world, because that all that time that you've spent working on that resume, making it the most beautiful resume in the entire world, they're going to look at it for 7 seconds and determine within 7 seconds if they're moving you forward or not. You could have used that same time to reach out to 5 people in the industry that are good, to companies that you admire, that have a job that you eventually want to do, and make those connections that way.
Mm.
So I think that's one way that I'm seeing changes in the job market is, the people that are really making a huge splash is the ones that are willing to like, get up in front of people and be confident and not just standing by blindly applying. Because like you could probably get a job blindly applying 3 years ago. It was still hard, but now it's more important than ever to make sure that you're really making those prominent relationships with people.
Yeah, I mean, quality over quantity is definitely something that needs to be infused back into the market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there's no reason you should be getting thousands and thousands of applications for a role, and so many people don't even meet some of the basic criteria that has been laid out by the company. Um, but I think a lot of it, I mean, it sounds similar to the way that we approach doing sales for Scaleless. If there's a company that just raised their Series A or Series B, or they had some sort of event, or they
Mm-hmm.
posted on LinkedIn, hey, we're about to hire for these 7 different roles. That's the time to reach out to them, not the time where they just laid off 20% of their team or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also context matters in terms of the industry vertical. Um, Obviously, ecom hit a downturn last year, but I'm sure there were other verticals that weren't in a downturn and were,
Mm-hmm.
on the up and up. So,
Mm-hmm.
I, what do you think in terms of, now that I mentioned the sort of switching from one industry to another, um, how important was industry experience when you were evaluating candidates coming in, especially on the earlier side when it's more challenging to have that specific experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's that's a tough one because it really depends on the company. Some companies value industry experience more than others. I will say in the e-commerce industry, for example, e-commerce experience is highly valued, and that can definitely put you in a better position than other applicants having that industry experience. Now, industry switching is not unheard of. I've done it, but it is harder not having that industry experience. So I think early on, when you're looking at like how you can get that industry experience, look at the tools and like the jargon and the stuff that is being worked on in those industries, and then verse yourself in that. So like when I was a campus program manager for a technical utility company, obviously these interns, they never worked for a software utility business. I never worked
Yeah.
for one either. There's not many of them out there. But what we looked for was like, okay, these are the tools that we use. Like we use like we actually use some pretty outdated tools, so it was actually really hard for us to find really good applicants because like not a lot of colleges were teaching these software languages anymore. But we looked for those certain software languages that they had on their resume. And so like, okay, you don't have experience with utilities, but you do have experience in the software languages or in these systems. So I think that's super important. I think that can kind of go hand in hand with sales as well. So like if you have those transferable skills in sales, and maybe you're going from, you're selling HR tech to you're selling, sales tech like a HubSpot. I think just being able to have those transferable skills where, hey, I did this in this system and I can also do this in this system. I think that can help in areas where, yeah, I haven't been in this industry before, but here are the similarities between the two, and not necessarily industry experience is going to make you a better applicant if they don't have those exact experiences. So look to see what systems they're using. A really great resource I like to use is called Built In. And if you go on there, they always have, like, on their company's homepage, they'll have the list of tools and systems that they use. So if you can like get yourself well versed in those systems and like software languages or different like revenue systems or HR systems, then that'll help kind of fill those gaps that you might be missing out from an industry experience.
Yeah. I think, industry experience is nice to have, but having the confidence to know that your experience can translate over into other industries, I think is important. And not to try and bottleneck yourself into one particular field because of a fear of the unknown, or
Mm-hmm.
potential worry that it's not going to be as easily transferable. But I think the vast majority of professions, there's a lot of transferable skills and knowledge, as long as it's not something like crazy, like being a doctor. If you're a neurosurgeon, I don't know how well
That
that
was
would
my
translate
backup
over
plan.
to,
That,
yeah.
so you just crushed my dreams right there.
um, but there's a lot of school that's involved for that too, which I don't
Mhm.
think, from a resume standpoint, um, I'm not even really sure where those will be in 3, 4, 5 years from now, because it's such
Mhm.
an outdated way of doing things.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not a very reliable or accurate source of information in any way whatsoever. And I think I've put very little value on them. It's more about all the other things that go into the interview process.
Mhm.
Um, you have some like very basic things that need to be checked, I guess, in the resume
Mhm.
to even get that first conversation. But at the end of the day, as you said, 7 seconds is not enough time to know whether or not you're going
Right.
to hire somebody.
I think one thing that I've learned, and that's like kind of a newer, I mean, it's not so much like a new trend of like 2024, but I think this has been going on maybe since post COVID, but the emphasis is less on education. And like education is so important. I highly, recommend going to college, getting that experience. It's so valuable if you have those opportunities. But there's some trends happening, and obviously the big tech companies usually lead the way in starting those trends. So they didn't make degree requirements a a degree a requirement in their job processes anymore. Yes, it's a nice to have, but it's not like, oh my gosh, you need to absolutely have a 4-year degree to be here. And there's two reasons for that. With the rise of inclusion practices, they, stepped back and realized like, hey, not everyone gets the opportunity to go to a 4-year school. So we want to make sure that we're leveling the playing field. And so people might be going to, coding boot camps, or might be doing other areas where they can get those skills necessary other than like a 4-year college. And so by opening that up, they're being more inclusive in their hiring practices, and that's kind of where it started out. Um, and then I think also colleges, put such an emphasis on like, at least for me when I was in college, I don't know how much of an emphasis it's put on in the university side anymore, but when I was a senior in college, early access to MBA. Get your MBA. Just go straight into your MBA. I know you've been here for 4 years, but how about another 3? Like, you're really going to love your life now. And I was like, I don't want to. Like, I like school, but like, I wanted to get out and work. I wanted to start working. I wanted to start interacting with people. I have way too much energy to sit down in a classroom for 10 hours a day. I just wanted to get to work. So, I was like, thank you so much, but no, no. And like they would always come back with all these stats like, oh, you get 30% more chance of getting a job if you have an MBA and like all these things. And like, again, I'm not dissing on an MBA. If you have an MBA, great job. I do not. I've stopped and started my master's three
I
times
I
now.
I bought the GMAT book like right when I was in the early days of doing or starting electric,
Yeah.
because it was still, it was teetering on whether or not this is going to turn into something or is it
Hmm.
not. And I opened that book and I made it about 3 minutes into it. I'm like, this is not happening. I don't know what geometry has to do with business, but I'm not relearning this shit. So it made my decision pretty easy.
Mine was economics, and which is funny because my mom has a master's in economics. I was like, once I saw that I had to take economics again, I was like, absolutely not. Like, I can't do it. But that ended up being what put me ahead of my peers in the HR industry altogether. Because while I
Mhm.
was going out working, getting an internship and starting to get that experience, my peers were still in school. So they're 2 or 3 years behind. And so now in the real world, MBAs don't necessarily equal 3 years work experience like they say because
Yes.
it's you're doing geometry. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I haven't done geometry since I was 19. Like I haven't had to. So really, and I think it's unfortunately some ways that the universities can take advantage of kids because a lot of people use that as an opportunity to understand what they want to do. Because maybe you graduated with a degree in economics and you're like, I hate economics, so I'm going to go get my MBA and do this a little bit more to figure out what I can do. Now, I do recommend that. I think that's a great call to make. But if you're doing it just so you can stand out, it's not necessarily going to make you stand out more than the next person.
Yeah. I think it's like at this point, it's becoming very profession specific in terms of which industries it still is like quote unquote a requirement for.
Yeah.
Um, I know for any of the roles that I've ever hired for and probably will hire for, it doesn't mean anything to me. Just the
Hmm.
fact of having one, maybe that person, improved in certain ways or got access to other experiences that ultimately, made them a more well-rounded applicant for
Hmm.
us. But having the MBA itself means very little.
Right.
And, I, um, I feel like there's a trap too within school. You can just sort of, oh, you're not really sure what you want to do, or you're, afraid to take the leap. I know people who are on their like third masters at this
Oh,
point, and I'm like, just enter the workforce or don't. I mean,
yeah.
whatever, whatever you want to do. But I feel like some school is really good for some people. Like they can leverage it. They're just good at it, and they thrive in that environment.
Hmm.
And then there's people where school, I can't even imagine having to do that. So yeah,
100%. I was like, get
figuring
me
out
out of
where
here.
you are and
I'm done.
figuring out where you are and how you can best, progress your career. It's not a one size fits all
100%.
approach for anybody. And I feel like there's always been this, especially in business, a lot of rhetoric around, everybody needs to do it this way, everybody needs to do it that way, and that's not the reality, except for maybe a very few, specific industries and
Hmm.
professions.
Yeah, I had took a career prep class in college for like my senior year. It was like just like one of those standard classes that everyone had to do before they graduated.
Mm,
And everything that was in that class was wrong. Like I shortly realized that once I actually got into the HR industry and started getting in the recruiting industry, I was like, all of this is no. Like I had to like unlearn everything that I learned. And it was like I remember, like put your education at the very top, and that's the most important thing on your resume. And make sure your resume is put out on like cardstock paper, and make sure these font sizes are great. And it was like so much emphasis on like resume building, which yes, I am a geek for a good resume, but like also like
yeah.
there's so many more important skills that we should have been taught and that we're not going to necessarily get in school that we're going to get in the industry experience, such as firing people or telling them no, you didn't get the job. Like I would have loved to know how to do that, not how to put my resume together.
Yeah.
So
Did did you
every
have to do it in person or did you, because I feel like I sort of got the cop out in that. it was never in person. It was
Yeah,
remote because of COVID.
right.
I mean, now we're going back into office, but
Hmm.
being on a screen is so much different than having to do it in person.
I can disassociate like so well if I'm on a screen. I'm like, it's just a video game. This isn't real life. I'll cry about it
Yep.
later, you know?
Yeah.
But no, I did it in person. I was 20 years old, 21 years old actually, and I worked for a casino. Um, the gaming industry is wild because they have not changed in 30 years, nor will they change in the next 30 years. I spent most of my time in my internship actually filing folders, but because they refuse to make everything digital. Anywho, yeah, we did these things called cultural auditions where we brought a bunch of people in because we're looking for people that have big personalities and, can really make our guests feel welcome because it was a huge casino with, 11 restaurants, over like
Mhm.
2,000 employees. So it was very, 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 very busy. But yeah, we would take them out one by one, which I'm sure that they actually probably don't do this anymore because like this is wild to me that we did this, but we would take them out one by one and say, "Okay, you got the job," or "Okay, bye." Like it was just like, I can't believe we did this. And like I had to get escorted by security one time out because some person was screaming at me and I'm like sitting there trying to hold it together. It was wild. I'm like, I'm really interested if they do this still. But yeah, that was very weird. But yeah, doing it in person. I don't have to do that anymore, thank goodness. But
Yes. And
it was a good experience.
yeah, I think everybody has to do it at least once. It's not going to make it suck less. I remember having to go through my first one, and that was definitely not fun.
Mm-mm.
Um, but I think it's different because I'm not in HR, and so there's like sort of almost rules and suggestions around how you're supposed to do it that feel like you shouldn't be doing it that way, but you have to do it that way because, from a business liability standpoint.
Hmm.
So it is really just, sort of transactional.
It
And
is.
I think at the end of the day, like whenever I'm talking to folks that are entering the workforce, like you should always have your ear to the ground when it comes to like new opportunities or things that might arise. Like I think I've never been in on that side of the equation, but I would think that it's actually probably easier to find a job while you are currently employed at a job than it is when you're out of work and you're
Hmm.
trying to re-enter work.
Yep.
Not that you shouldn't be loyal to your business, because I think a lot of great things can come out of loyalty.
Hmm.
And also, obviously, I would prefer that to, having to deal with,
Being a
like,
business
I
owner,
think
yeah.
we had somebody like bring all competing offers for like 3 straight weeks from other businesses. And it got to the point where I was like, this is like the second or third time that you've tried to do this. Like, just, I
Oh,
mean, it's cool
yeah,
if you want to leave, just leave. But like, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
yeah.
And you might be able to get more out of another business than you're able to get out of us, which is
Hmm.
awesome. I mean, that's how the world works. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, I think you should always be out there looking to see when the next opportunity is going to present itself.
I 100% agree. And I think, especially with the generation that's coming up, compared to like our parents' generation, my dad has worked for Boeing for 40 years. And so he is like die hard Boeing loyalty. Boeing's a great company and they've taken such great care of my dad. But like
Mm,
this generation that's coming up is more like, hey, what can Boeing give me? Like I'm valuable, I'm a valuable asset. What can they give me in return? And that goes for any company. So I think that, you know, that generation is going to be more vocal of the fact of like, hey, like I have better opportunities elsewhere, so I'm going to go there because like they're going to appreciate me more. And again, have loyalty to the company, but like also have loyalty to yourself. Because I think
mhm.
I've seen people just get trapped in jobs because they think it's almost kind of like a bad relationship where it's like, well, I don't know what else is out there, so I'm just going to stay with this. And like I see the same thing like happen with people in jobs. It's like, well, you know, they take good care of me and, I'm loyal to them and I would hate to leave them. It's like, yeah, no one likes telling their boss they're leaving. Like I don't think I've ever done it without crying actually. But like it at the end of the day, every single time I've left a job for another opportunity has worked out in my favor. Whether I've stayed at the company long or short time, I have learned brand new things. I had someone on my team at Recharge actually. Recharge was her first full-time job, and she was a killer. She was so great at her job. And then she got another job, and she was like, you know what? Like, I've learned all I needed to learn here. And so I need to go somewhere else and have a whole new set of challenges. And like for her to recognize that at such a young age and so early in her career is really was really impressive to me, because that shows like, hey, like she knows, she's self-aware enough to know like, hey, I'm actually like pretty like steady now. Like I've kind of hit a ceiling. So now it's time to go, take on some new challenges. And having that kind of grit and ambition will put you really far. And I think she's been able to go really far because she's had that attitude of like, yeah, they appreciate me, but also like, am I learning anything? I always tell people like, if you're comfortable in your job, it's time to go. Like, it's time to go. Let's go take on some new challenges. And also, the statistics, you earn more money over time the more often you leave jobs. Now, no one likes a job jumper where you're 5 months this job, 5 months that job. Obviously, shows some loyalty, but you also are able to, the average increase that you get from going to a new job, last time I checked, was like around 10% to 15%. But then the average year over year increase from staying at a job is like 2%, 3%, depending on the company. So, I think it's a healthy balance there of like stay at a job if they're taking care of you and compensating you fairly, but also if you're not succeeding anymore and you're like, you know what, I need to learn more challenges, and because you're going to get burnt out if you're just doing the same thing every single day and you're not giving yourself a challenge. Now, some people like that, some people are like, I've got too much going on in my personal life. I want something that's I can just clock in and clock out. And that's great. But if you're feeling like I don't know if I want to leave, but like also I'm not learning anything new, then it's like it's time to go, because there's actually so many companies out there that would probably love to have you. And that way you're being able to get more skill sets. If I look at a resume and I see someone was at a company for 5 years and then someone with equally just as much of experience, but chopped it up between two companies, I'm going to actually think that the other person probably has a better skill set and more confidence with change and adaptability when they come into my company. Because okay, they've had new experiences within a short amount of time. And like they've been able to see shifting challenges and stuff like that. So like I'm gonna think like, okay, they've worked at two companies versus one company. Doesn't matter that they've been there for 5 years or 2 years. So again, everything is like, pertains to the job and the industry, but I think sometimes people think that, if I stay long enough at a job, like I will be able to get any job I want. And it's like, that's not necessarily the case. Go where you're being challenged and go where you're being, rewarded and you feel rewarded in your work.
And I think it's very company dependent too,
Hmm.
because if your company is growing really quickly, then your job is going to be changing,
Yeah.
every 3 months, every 6 months. And so if your business that you're working at goes from 30 people to, 250 people, but you're there for 5 years, that's basically like, if you made 3 or 4 career changes along the way
Yeah.
and moved from role to role, which I think is cool about some of the larger businesses that have, sort of divisions and ways that they can move people around to keep
Hmm.
them stimulated.
Hmm.
Um, but you still have that, continuity. And
Hmm.
if I was an employee, I'm going and asking for a raise at least every 6 to 12 months
Yeah.
with very clearly, documented reasons of why,
Hmm.
because, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And it's not like, at Electric, I was ignoring the fact that people needed to get raises, but when you're dealing with 1,000 other things and everything seems fine, it wasn't like top of mind for me when I woke up that morning. Oh, I need to give this person a 10% raise.
Right.
I try to get better about that over time, but in reality, it was the ones that were able to clearly delineate their value to the business, and then also have the authority to ask for that and have an open and honest conversation. So
Hmm.
I think that's important to sort of know your worth too,
Yeah.
but within reason, because the grass can be greener on the other side as well.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you're an employee, especially in a market that's like hot for employees, you should do your due diligence on the company that you're leaving to join, because I know quite a few people who, made transitions in late 2022 or early 2023, and, they were part of layoffs, or, and they still haven't gotten back into another job, but they probably would still be employed at the business that they left to go to that new role for. So
Yeah.
it's a give and a take for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make of like doing your due diligence on like where are you actually jumping to. Because sometimes it's high risk, high reward, but otherwise, nobody foresaw COVID happening and those massive
Yes.
layoffs happening. So, yeah, definitely do your research if you are. Don't just try to go out and grab competitive offers just to try to leverage a raise for your current company. I have never countered a current employee. That was something that I was taught by my favorite boss that I've ever had. And he never countered an offer from a current employee because he was like, you know what, like, this sounds like a great opportunity for you. And, if he's like, I can't match that, or like, hey, like, let's see if we can get you there if you want to, but like also like I'm not going to give you more money just because you got more money from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because it was more of like, you know what, like obviously you're interested in leaving, so like let's actually discuss that. So I think, I think it's okay to like use that as leverage of like, hey, like I am kind of interviewing for this other company, but to do what the example that you brought, like every week just interview, like how much company time was he spending interviewing like to get these offers.
Yeah.
So I think it's, if you're already starting that process and you're getting offers, then I think it's probably a good sign that you're ready to jump and go to a different company.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for joining me today for the inaugural episode. So hopefully everything went smoothly. But before we hop off here, um, what would be one thing that you would tell somebody who's early in their career, who's maybe looking to make a transition or feels a little bit stuck? What would be your suggestion in 2024 for them?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great question. And this is hard. This is hard as an early career, but find the ways that can make yourself stand out. Um, and what I mean by that is, finding that niche specialty within a specific type of industry, finding those things that you're really, really good at. Don't spend so much time on your weaknesses where you're trying to overcompensate your weaknesses to match your strengths. Go to your strengths and really put a lot of your energy into your strengths, because that can make you stand out. Instead of being good at 20 different things, like being somewhat good and average at 20 different things, find 5 really important things in the industry that you're really excited about, really passionate about, and focus on those and put your energy in that. And then that way you'll be able to develop it over time and really set yourself apart from the other people. For example, in HR, highly technical HR people are very slim pickings. So if you can find those people that have those soft skills and HR experience, but are also very technical, that kind of puts you in a unique position where you might be more attractive to prospective companies. So stop worrying about all your weaknesses. I have them and we all have them, but we also have our strengths. And so really try to hone in on those strengths and make that your brand, find your brand, and so you can market yourself to those prospective companies and network. Reach out to those people that you admire, see if they'll grab coffee over Zoom, DoorDash them a gift card, send them wine like you did, Brandon. Wine will
Yes.
get you everywhere.
Yeah, if you don't reply to wine in a handwritten note, then you're just not a nice
Yeah.
person. So,
Then I don't want to talk with you anyways.
exactly. That's how you can weed them out.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again. Where can people connect with you online
Yeah,
if they
you
want
can
to chat?
connect with me at LinkedIn. My name is Lizzy Mann. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. This is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at scaleless.ai and apexearlycareers.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.